So welcome back to another From the Studio podcast with me, Nick Bramley. Stories from the world of product design, hosted by myself and my colleague, Richard Hall. Richard is the Managing Director of PDM International, and we love to talk about innovation, product design, and all things around that agenda. And today we've got an absolutely fantastic guest. We've worked hard to get him on here. He's a very busy man, but we have Jonathan O'Halloran. He's the CEO of QuantuMDx Limited. And for those who work in life science, tools and diagnostics, I'm sure Jonathan will be no stranger to you. He's well known, very successful, and runs a multi-award winning business, which we're going to explore a little bit of in this podcast. So without further ado, Jonathan, you like to be called Jono. So Jono, welcome to the From the Studio podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Great to have you on. As I say, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on here. I know you're very busy, but the reason that Richard and I wanted to have you on is that we've been to a number of events over the last couple of years, and you're very high profile in terms of the success for the business. And because From the Studio is about exploring innovation and product design and success, you would be an absolute natural candidate to have on here. So thank you very much. And let's start with you first, Jonathan. We're going to explore more about the business over the course of the podcast, but if you can just help the audience from the outset who maybe don't know about QuantuMDx, can you share a little bit about what it's all about in headline format and the products that you've currently got in your portfolio?
Sure, yeah. So we are a diagnostics company, and we've created a PCR device. So I'm sure everybody after the pandemic understands what a PCR device is. Ours is slightly different in that all you need to do is put in the raw sample. So if you're taking a swab and you put it into the buffer that comes with this swab, all you need to do is just put it into our disposable cassette and put it in the device and press go. And hey presto, 30 minutes later, you've got your COVID result. So essentially we get rid of the lab within the process. And it's battery operated, it's small. I put it in my backpack and carry it around. So it's essentially a lab in a backpack. Wow,
that is definitely something we're going to explore. How did we get to that and the journey to that? So that's a great description, by the way. That's not the first time you've used that, is it, by the way, John? I don't think the lab in a backpack. That's I suppose lab companies are probably not your favorite people, or you're not their favorite people, because you're trying to replace them with a backpack and a diagnostic that's on the go, really, I guess.
Yeah, but so our model is to augment labs rather than replace labs. I think labs know that they are only as good as the logistics and only as good as the people going into getting tested. And so if you're providing more opportunities to patients to get tested in more convenient ways, i.e. taking the lab in a backpack to the patient, the more people will get tested. So rather than competing against labs, we're purely providing them with a tool to expand their market. So in actual fact, they're embracing what we are doing.
Excellent, good to hear. Richard, when we were considering our guest list for this next tranche, we've got a number of the From the Studios historically in the can, as we would say, and we're now on the next sort of series, as it were. We sound like Netflix, don't we? What was important to you in terms of looking at getting Jonathan along as a guest, and how did you feel when we managed to secure his time in his busy diary?
Yeah, it's what you alluded to earlier, Nick, in terms of, we've been to lots of awards over the years, and QuantuMDx are kind of all over it. I think the main thing for me is that QuantuMDx have just shown incredible resilience since being founded, and I would say that they're now, a major force, within the medtech community. But I think a lot of that comes from strong leadership. People able to mobilize teams and investment. And I think the major thing for me was that I was really humbled by the journey that Jonathan's been through, with just incredible humility as well. I just think it's a really, really good example of how good leadership, mobilizing teams, how it actually can be done. And actually, it's the most difficult thing that you could actually do. But QuantuMDx just seemed to have done it with ease.
Well, I'm sure Jono would say it's not as easy as he's made it look, but let's explore that, because this podcast is about tapping into innovation, creativity, entrepreneurism, leadership, and you've definitely got a remarkable entrepreneurial spirit. We had a chat off air a couple of weeks ago, Jono, and I think Richard and I both, when we finished the call, were like, wow, the whole journey. So, from a humble beginnings in a garage to running a successful, highly regarded, multi-award winning business, how did the journey start? Were there any key points along the way that have maybe shaped where the business is today? Give us a sort of almost like a roadmap of start to finish with the high points and maybe some low points in there as well, John.
Yeah, well, I guess if you go right the way back, it's the whole thing started in the 80s when I was watching things like Wall Street and Secret of My Success on TV. That really gave me that entrepreneurial spirit. And then that was then further enforced by one of our neighbors in the village, who happened to be Sir Freddie Laker, whose son and I became very, very good friends and remain best friends to this day. And I got a good schooling in entrepreneurialism from Sir Freddie.
I'll be honest with you, that's as good a name drop as we've had on the entire series. By the way, John. That's a boom. That's a Freddie Laker. Yeah, I mean he tried to change the entire aviation industry, didn't he? And did all sorts of other things as well. The absolute classic entrepreneur. So so you started off, as a with an entrepreneurial spark. How did that manifest itself into setting the business up and getting going and to get to where you are now?
Yeah, well, I was always into genetics, so I did genetics for my undergraduate degree. Ended up being invited over to Harvard during my PhD, and when I was at Harvard, another name drop, a chap called Craig Ventnor came to our lab and had a chat with us all, and you may know him from the guy who sequenced the first human genome. He spoke about at some point in the future, because everything moves so quickly, that we'll be able to do complex genetic analyses on portable devices, and we won't need to have labs. And I thought, oh, you know what? I think I'll do that.
I mean, that's quite a leap from somebody saying this is what the future might look like. I mean, I was promised a silver suit and a jetpack from Tomorrow's World in 1977, but I didn't think I'm the guy who's going to have to invent the jetpacks. It's a hell of a sort of a leap for your spirit to say, let's do that. And was that your entire focus after you've been through and done your PhD, and that was the start of your journey?
Yeah, well, I decided to drop out from my PhD, much to the annoyance of my parents, and decided to put a 20-year plan together that will ultimately result in what you see behind me right here, which is QBox. And so the first thing in that plan was to spend as much time with Sir Freddie as possible to understand how business worked. The second thing to do was to get a technician's job in a multidisciplinary pathology lab so they can understand everything about diagnostics. It was really at that point that I really fell in love with diagnostics, luckily. And really developed a passion for all aspects of it, and wrote multiple business cases and multiple business plans, and eventually one of them got some traction, and I met my co-founder of QuantuMDx, Elaine Warburton, OBE, as she is now, and we set up our first company, which was a genetic services company. I really saw that as a learning platform for raising money and being on boards and all that sort of stuff. And that was pretty much it. And that went well for about 2 years, and exited that after learning our first lesson, which was pick your co-workers and your board carefully. We had some major differences. Anyway, so I exited that and thought, right, now I'm ready. So I've learned everything. Now I'm ready. So we started off building our QBox in my garage about 14 years ago.
So you were deliberately going through building blocks of self-development then, Jono, weren't you, to get to be ready to be successful? It strikes me that you weren't ever going to be successful on a small scale. Were you learning to be successful on a scalable level so that you could then say, now I am ready, I know where I'm going to be? A 20-year plan is quite ambitious, by the way, but was it all about always scalability?
Yeah, I mean, I say 20-year plan. Looking back at the time, it was a 10-year plan. Oh, it's just taken 20 years. Yeah, they always say double it, and that is true, unfortunately. So, yeah, I mean, I was not looking at this to be just a quick lifestyle business. This was going to be something that was much, much larger and more impactful. We had, grand designs on really impacting global health, and that was very, very important to us. And as I'll get onto later in the story, that really helped form the specifications for QPOC.
Okay. Did you have when you say you had a 10-year, sort of 20-year plan, you'll have had steps along the way and key milestones and targets and things to achieve. Did you ever feel you were going off piste, or you were getting dragged off track, or you weren't going fast enough? What was that like for an entrepreneur sort of mindset? Because it's never as easy as you think it's going to be when you look at it on paper, is it?
No, exactly. I mean, you map stuff on paper and then reality hits, and you just got to be able to roll with the punches and be flexible. And so for me, a lot of the flexibility had to come from me running off in tangents. I really got interested in the devices within pathology labs rather than learning about the quality assurance and all that sort of aspects that I should be learning about. So those delays came from me, but that I was in my 20s, so I didn't care too much. It was I was having fun. It was enjoyable. I was in no rush. So yeah, for me that was fine.
I suspect bags of energy as well. So it's just another hurdle, another challenge. Let's just keep going, yeah.
Oh yeah, I used to drive the managing director of the hospital mad with all my ideas. Just looking back at it, I feel so sorry for him.
Well, Richard, I'm going to come to you because at PDM International, you work with lots of entrepreneurs and business owners and innovators. Are there some common traits that you see in the ones that are successful or even super successful, like Jono is, in terms of traits that help them, or at least help them to project that likelihood of success?
Yes, I think it alludes to what Jono just said. I think that to be successful, I think part of it is to be aware that it's not necessarily the technology that will make the business successful. And a lot of people get wrapped up in the tech and assume that people will engage with it. Common traits are really strong values, fostering culture, and also an immense sense of motivation and tenacity, which obviously Jono's got. I think the major one really is just an all-round awareness that, there are lots of things that will impact the success of a business. Intellectual property, regulatory, user behavior, budgets, working with people, mobilizing teams, etc., etc.
Okay, and are there some common traits that derail entrepreneurial ambition? There's lots of people who've got ambition, but then you look at the characteristics and think, never going to happen. Yeah,
lots of people have got ambition, but they need to be very steadfast in terms of the journey. So, common themes that can derail an entrepreneurial journey can be a misplaced sense of the technology and how mature it is. So people thinking that it's more mature than what it actually is. Things take a lot longer technologically. Another one is not understanding the user. So, big assumptions in terms of user behavior. That's something that can derail it. Other aspects are having the wrong team. You can have either groupthink where everybody has the same kind of method of thought, or you can have big conflicts that Jono mentioned a bit earlier. Running out of budget is another big one. Things do take longer in terms of time, but also budget. And more recently, regulatory. The change from MDD to MDR is kind of putting a lot of resistance on a lot of companies that are trying to get innovations into the market. But generally, you've got to be an all-rounder. But you've got to be a great leader to mobilize teams who can follow you.
Okay, well, let's talk about leadership a little bit in terms of the scale of the business then, Jonathan. You're based in Newcastle upon Tyne. For those who don't know, because it's an international podcast, it's in the northeast of England. And I've said here, it might not previously have been recognised as a centre for sort of life sciences and medical bioscience excellence, maybe like not like a Cambridge or an Oxford. So how did you get to be based in Newcastle? And do you think that the likes of QuantuMDx are playing a part in creating more awareness of the availability of resources in a place like Newcastle upon Tyne?
Yeah, so it was again a convoluted story as to how we got up to Newcastle. I spent about 9 months to 12 months in my lab looking for funding, and we got funding from the South African government as part of their regional investment hubs. And so moved down to Cape Town for 2 years during the World Cup, which was fantastic. After 2 years being there, the government decided to amalgamate all the regional funds into a single central fund, and they cut 2/3 of their projects. Essentially, all of those projects that wasn't going to give a return in 3 years, they cut, which included us. So we packed up, moved back to the UK, and our chairman at the time, Professor Sir John Byrne, who was based at the Life Centre in Newcastle, invited us to set up a lab there with some free lab space. And as any entrepreneur being offered anything for free, you grab it. So we went up there with the idea that we will be in Newcastle for a year, maybe two, and we've never left. And when you say it's not exactly the hub for life science and diagnostics and science generally in Newcastle. Our chairman, Professor Sir John Byrne, would disagree. In fact, he thinks Newcastle is the center of the world. And he is very enigmatic and very convincing, and he certainly convinced us. And when we got there, there was enough good people, more coming every year from the universities in the area, from Edinburgh, Durham, Newcastle, Northumbria, that in terms of people capital, we had absolutely no problem hiring great quality people. But when we started looking for our own labs, there was nothing in the city. When we were looking for venture capital, there was nothing in the city. When we were looking for all of the standard support stuff, there was nothing in the city. Now, all that has changed. There are tons of companies, many of which are run by ex-QuantuMDx folk or spun out from us, and we're looking at spinning out a couple more this year. And there really is a cluster that has developed quite recently. And with that comes all of the support and the venture capital and the money and all that sort of stuff, which is great to see. And so I firmly believe that in another 10 years' time, there will be a really good, thriving community of companies that will start to be rivaling Oxford, maybe not Cambridge, but certainly up the Oxford area.
You strike me, you must be very proud of that, being a front runner for that and looking at sort of connecting with the universities. Geographically, you've got two big universities in Newcastle, but you're 20 miles from Durham and maybe 45 minutes an hour from Edinburgh by train. So you've got a really good cluster of really high quality sort of Russell Group universities there. Was that part of the thinking? Despite the fact you couldn't get access to funding and infrastructure and things, was it once you were there, was that always going to be the case to stay, recruit, develop locally because Newcastle became the base and it became the obvious place to stay?
Yeah, so there were several factors for why we wanted to stay. At the time, we were just coming out of the global financial crisis, and the government were setting up funds such as Eye for Eye, et cetera, and they were clearly distributing those funds geographically even, which meant that being a relatively large fish in a small pond meant that we attracted a lot of government funds and grants through that route, which made the company sustainable early on. So that was a very fortunate byproduct of being in Newcastle. But again, as I was saying, the quality of the team that we've got, people, most folk from the Northeast don't want to leave the Northeast after their education, would like to stay there. And we benefited from that significantly. And we didn't want to lose our team, which we would have done if we moved down into the Oxbridge area. And And as a big football fan, the cheap season tickets for Newcastle United were fantastic, and it's very difficult to leave Newcastle, isn't it? It's an incredible city.
My daughter is a fourth year. She's doing her PGCE teacher training fourth year. She graduated from Newcastle University in the summer, and she's there. She has no intention of leaving. She's had 4 years up there. She loves the city, loves the place, and if she can secure her sort of employment in a secondary school science teaching role in the Newcastle area, she's not coming back anytime soon. She just loves the place. So there's a lot to be said for that. I'm not sure I can agree with you with the cost of the season tickets at Newcastle, because you still have to watch Newcastle. And as a Middlesbrough fan, I'm just going to accept the fact that we'll agree to disagree on that one, Jonathan.
But I wasn't suggesting the football was any high quality football. But it was still football. Now I'm gonna get it in the neck from the team when I get back to the office.
You are indeed. Well, let's hope we can edit that bit out. We're not going to do that. We're going to leave that in, so we'll see what happens to your football reputation in the office. So, Richard, in terms of actually, let's go back to Jonathan about innovation and product. So, I've had a look at some research, and since 2008, you developed a suite of diagnostic and sequencing technologies, and they're capable of being assembled into a wealth of low-cost, accurate handheld devices for the next generation of doctors and health professionals. How does that keep going in terms of what's next, and how do you take your idea from idea and concept through to market readiness products?
Yeah, that's really important. So we define what we want to have at the end of it. So for us, it was a battery operated portable molecular diagnostic device that can take a raw sample without any pre-analytical steps, and within 30 minutes provide a complex molecular diagnostic result. So that's multiplexing, looking at tens of targets, almost hundreds of targets. That's where we wanted to get to. We then set off on stripping that down. What processes are required to deliver that vision? First of all, there's the pre-analytical steps that people normally do, but we wanted them to be automated. So that's lysis and nucleic acid extraction. Then after that, the next series of tasks is reagent storage, rehydration of that reagents, and then PCR, that's the amplification, essentially a molecular photocopier where we make billions of copies of certain pieces of DNA, enough so that we can detect them. And then, of course, then there's the multiplex detection. So we break all those tasks up into little bits, and then we start looking at technologies that we could use to apply to them that would work in a very simple, easy format. We come up with lots of what we call poppies, which are proof of principle instruments, and we start testing loads of them. So for instance, for our extraction, we must have run through about 70 different versions. For our PCR amplification, we must have looked at about 25 different technologies for the heating and cooling, and for the detection, gosh, loads. We run through all of our poppy analysis, essentially setting an assay challenge. Can you achieve this with this technology? And out of it, we down select the suitable candidate technologies that will then go forwards. Then it comes, do these work nicely with the other sections, the integration step? And so we take the technology candidates and we run them with all the downstream technologies to see which ones work best. And then you integrate from there. So it is a very methodical process, but you have to know where you're going. And as this takes 10 to 15 years, you need to understand where the market is going, where it will be in 10 to 15 years, such that when you have developed your product, it's going to be competitive on the market. Now, I'm very proud to say that we nailed it on the head, because right now, everybody is looking for rapid multiplex portable molecular diagnostics, and we've got it. But that doesn't always happen. I mean, you don't always get it right.
Yeah, I mean, people say you make your own looking life, don't they, as well? And part of that's down to the processes you've gone through. When you started off, though, and you're saying this is our end goal, and we need to have this multi-level kind of product capability. Was anybody doing that, or was that sort of right? We are almost predicting the future at that point, and we are confident we can nail that sort of delivery, even though maybe the technology might not have been in place at the time, or maybe some of the processes, you were changing the ballgame. I'm just thinking about how realistic was that sort of vision at the time you were setting it?
Yeah, at the time, nobody was doing it at all. There was a company called Cepheid who were developing a fully integrated system called the Gene Expert that doesn't really multiplex massively. So it's looking at a slightly different market to us. So like this singleplex, does this patient have flu? Does this patient have TB? That kind of thing. Whereas we're looking at, does this patient have tuberculosis? What kind of tuberculosis? And are there any drug resistant markers? So a much more complex and fuller diagnostics. So yeah, absolutely nobody was doing it. Nobody was talking about drug resistance. Nobody was talking about syndromic panel testing, which is testing for every bug that causes a certain symptom, such as fever. So I guess I predicted the future by looking at what I could see as coming through the papers at the time. We really predicted that there would be this issue with drug resistance, really based upon the early papers of MRSA that started to come out.
Okay, Jonathan, Richard, sorry, how does this journey that sort of Jonathan's been on look in comparison to some of the work that we do at PDM, and looking at the pitfalls and challenges that people have? Is Jonathan taking a different route, a better route, a more defined route to what you've seen, or is he leading the way in terms of how he approaches this kind of ambition to set the future agenda? How does that fit with your normal expectations of clients that you work with?
I think the first thing to note really is I would say QuantuMDx, their journey is somewhat extraordinary, if not inspirational compared to some companies that I know of. I think horizon scanning, i.e., within the realms of possibility, is something that all organizations should do. I think with things like the fourth industrial revolution, there's so much tech coming our way that it's important that a company is aware of it, but also knows how to use it, but also more importantly, how not to use it. So just because you can do something in terms of technology, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should. I think user behavior, which we spoke about earlier, is really important. So understanding the behaviors of the user, whether that's a clinician or a patient or a consumer. And I think that fundamentally it's just really keeping ahead of the game, as I say, innovate or die. And I think that's become more true than ever because the tools to enable people to innovate are becoming more and more mature.
Okay, that seems fair. And in terms of setting a standard, it's great that, and that's why we got you on, Jonathan. We're both very big fans of kind of where you've been and where you're going and where you've got to, really, I guess. Something I'd like to explore is your network. You seem really well networked nationally and internationally. And how have you built that up over the years? And has it been a deliberate plan rather than something more ad hoc? How have you got this network of people around you?
Yeah, so it's been a mix of both, mix of ad hoc and a mix of planning. So it really stems from I'm just passionate about diagnostic technologies and diagnostics in general, and I think that passion means that I want to get out and talk to people. So I've spent so much time just chatting with people at conferences and getting to know what they're doing, what's happening in the market, technology scanning, offering up myself to sit on panels and all that sort of stuff, purely because I've got a huge interest in it. But the byproduct of that obviously is a network that is really, really useful. And I think it is extremely important because it gives you a really in-depth view of what's happening in the market and really helps you then once you've got a product to really get the word out about it so that people can start buying it.
I think someone's network is often a direct result of the activity they put into it. Like you say, you put yourself forward on boards and panels and speaking engagements and conferences and all that kind of thing. So it's not deliberate that you meet specific people, but those specific people are drawn to you because you're out there doing that and putting yourself out. And I think it's a direct result of that.
Yeah.
How has that network been useful to you? I'm thinking in terms of leveraging investment opportunities, the COVID crisis, and maybe other key times. When has that network been of most value to QuantuMDx, Jono?
Well, I mean, it's hugely value to us because it gets the word out quickly. So, for instance, on my LinkedIn, if I put any post out there, you instantly, I get 15, 20,000 people have seen it. So, in terms of distribution of information, that's fantastic. But then it also means that through the network, I've got access now to all of the leaders of all of the large companies that are out there. That we can then start looking at doing things with. Again, one funny story about how my network worked for me was quite some years ago, about 6 years ago, we were very focused on developing TB, and that's still my pet project and something that I'm really passionate about. And we really want to provide a drug-resistant TB assay and a non-sputum diagnostic assay as well for subclinical TB, as I think both those products will be transformational for TB control. And I was on holiday in France, and I picked up my phone as it rang, and this chap on the other end said, "Mr. Bill Gates would really like to meet you." And this had just come from a cold call from something on LinkedIn.
Hang on. You were called by a representative of Bill Gates. You are the ultimate. Today, there's been some boom name drop there. That beats the lot, that, Jono.
Yeah, I was saving that one. And then so I flew back and got to meet Bill at the Bill and Melinda Gates headquarters in London. We had a great chat for a couple of hours, which was fantastic. We showed him our tech and what we were planning on doing. And out of that meeting was great. He then introduced us to his technology team. We started setting up projects, co-development projects, and that sort of thing. And he and his team then guided us on what we should be really focusing on in terms of price points and materials choices. It was really detailed. Really helped us then hone our specifications so that we can get something that was applicable to a wider audience in low to middle income countries, which is fantastic. Since then we've met up with him multiple times, and that level of guidance that that he's willing to provide anybody who's in a area of interest for him has been wonderful and very, very useful. It did, to the horror of some of our shareholders, mean that we pulled back from launching an early product that was far too expensive, and we made the decision based upon discussions with key people at the Gates Foundation to get back into product design, just so that we could take some cost out of our disposable, as it was clear that it wouldn't be market applicable at the prices that we were looking at. And that's turned out to be the correct choice, which is fantastic.
It's a slight conflict with your shareholders who are looking for return on that investment and thinking the product's ready to then go back a step or two, isn't it, on that basis, but proven to be the right choice, yeah?
Oh, yeah, you have to have some balls to do that, to go back to your shareholders and say, actually, we think we're going to just have to do a little bit, take some more cost out of this and do a little bit more research. So we're not going to launch immediately.
Having said that, if you're using Bill Gates as the mentor who's suggesting that, then you're probably going to get a bit more leverage than you would if it was just Joe Public, aren't you, really?
Yes, yeah. At least it's a validated decision.
Okay. Is there any advice you give anyone about building the network if they're a startup entrepreneur on the journey? What would you say about networks and building them, and any advice you give them?
Yeah, just get out there. Go to conferences, speak to people. Don't be shy. Don't be embarrassed. Do as much as you can. Make a name for yourself. Pick up the phone, send emails. Geez, when I think back, this young kid just sending these detailed emails about what I wanted to do to the CEOs and the CTOs of massive multinational companies.
Yeah.
you know, and a bunch of them landed, and I got meetings out. I mean, it's incredible. I think the most important thing with building any network is make sure you're a domain expert. Because if you don't know squat about the domain you're in, just forget about it. It will just be embarrassing.
You'll get seen through quite quickly. Richard, I just want to explore a little bit. We've spent quite a bit of time in recent years building your network, and how is that helping PDM International at the moment then in terms of building your own profile and creating new opportunities?
Yeah, I think having a relationships plan is really important, you know, kind of similar to a business plan, and as Jono said, getting out there. With what we do, we are innovation support and product design. So it's quite niche, you know, what we do. It's not a usual kind of regular business where people are manufacturing products, for example. So it's what Jono said, it's kind of getting out there. I think the major kind of benefit for us that, you know, after 18 years in business, we're now getting referrals from people that we don't even know. So it's a referral from a referral. And I think for us, it's really, you know, focusing on really good, high quality work, understanding your market, adding value. So I do a lot of conferences and things as well. And I think a lot of it is, you know, having fun as well. You know, they say that people buy from people, which is completely true. But I think it's, you know, fundamental to have a, you know, a really good network that you can get leverage on, not in terms of selling services, but also in terms of collaboration, you know, co-design, adding value to other companies, you know, and I think that is, you know, I think within the medtech, that ecosystem is really, really strong, and there's some really nice people out there, and you know, it's something we're proud to be part of.
It's nice to know after 18 years you're an overnight success, Richard, anyway, isn't it, to be fair, as they say. So that's good to know. Jonathan, just conscious of a little bit of time. We mentioned in the intro about being a multi-award winning business at QuantuMDx. So Richard and I have sat in admiration at a number of award events in the last 12 months. Now we're allowed to go back out and wear the black tie and the slightly tight dinner suit kind of thing after COVID. And you're always shortlisted. You often win, you know, and you're very humble in your acceptance of that success. You know, you're always bringing your team on to the stage. You're always sharing that sort of winning limelight, etc. Can I just ask you what the mentality is around the awards sector for QuantuMDx? Because a lot of people see it as a bit cynical, or throw yourself in for an award, we'll win it, it's a bit of PR. You clearly have a different approach to it. You know, what's the thinking behind awards for QuantuMDx, Jonathan?
Well, I believe that culture makes a company. Without culture, you can't work the hard hours. You're not together as a team. And so I manage my culture as if it's the most important thing within the company, because I truly believe that. When we put in for awards, this gives us an opportunity to reward people who've gone that extra mile to come along with us, enjoy the champagne, enjoy the food, get up on stage, enjoy the limelight. But when we win them, and we get to bring them back to the office, and we have, you know, we triumphantly put it in our award case, which is now run out of space, and everybody gets around, we have a bit of a drink, we have a bit of a celebration, brings the team together. The team then look and recognize, oh, wow, we must be with a company that is going places, a company that is winning awards and is being recognized for it. And that's huge. I mean, after 2 years, my team didn't work from home. They weren't on furlough. They were in during the pandemic with a lovely letter from Matt Hancock allowing us to work and travel. And they were working from 8 o'clock in the morning through to 10 o'clock at night for 2 years without fuss.
And that's culture. Two things there, just an observation. One is Matt Hancock is the worst name drop you've done in this entire podcast, by the way. Let's pick up on that. And secondly, you must have a bigger trophy cabinet than they've got at St. James's Park, but we'll leave that one as well. So thank you. It is a culture thing, because you can see genuinely when your team go up to accept the awards, you know, they genuinely are excited and engaged and proud, and that must help for recruitment, retention, development, all those things that are part of your cultural growth within Newcastle, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it really is important. I mean, when people come into the office, it's quite a cool space. Everyone's an open plan. I sit in the open plan office with everybody.
Yeah.
We all have a laugh. What we do is great fun. And if you don't find diagnostics fun, then it's not the right place for you. You should go elsewhere. And the awards is just part of that. I mean, we do many other things. We have in-office parties. We go-karting. We do a whole bunch of different things to foster that coming together, that great culture. And yeah, it's great for retention, without a doubt.
Excellent. Final note from me, final question from me for you, Jonathan, is what's next, or what's in the pipeline for QuantuMDx? What's currently taking your own time and focus?
Yeah, so world domination is next, obviously. So we don't think small. So we've just agreed a great collaboration with a Chinese company called Sanshou. Part of that collaboration is to then roll QuantuMDx's QPOC and tests out throughout China. They're helping us also with cost down projects and with further assay development. So these are the tests that run on QPOC. And so we're quickly expanding our menu of assays, which makes the device more attractive and helps us make more money, because we make money by selling the cassettes. The more assays, the more cassettes you sell. We're also looking at further partnerships here in Europe, which hopefully we'll be announcing in the next couple of weeks, and also partnerships in the States as well. And maybe in South America and Africa as well. So we're thinking big, we're thinking globally, and driving the development of tests to support that and to make us quite a substantial company in the future.
Well, I suspect that Richard and I will continue to watch your journey and continue to sit in awe at that world domination as that continues, and I'm sure you'll be massively successful. I just want to finish by saying this has been an absolutely fantastic podcast, shared lots and lots of really useful insights and just thoughts for entrepreneurs and product developers and those kind of people who are our audience from the studio. It just remains for me to say that we are PDM International. Our contact details are on the screen for those who watch this as a visual, or if you listen to the podcast, the contact details will be in the show notes. But without further ado, I'd just like to say again, thank you, Jonathan, for being an absolutely fantastic guest. And thanks, Richard, for being my co-host.
Thank you.